The Galactic Council Chamber was the most beautiful room in the known universe. Giant pillars of living crystal rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves. 47 species had gathered here for 12,000 years to decide the fate of civilizations. Wars had been stopped in this room. Peace treaties signed. The future of entire worlds decided with a single vote. Ambassador sat in humanity's chair and tried not to feel small. The chair was positioned at the very edge of the chamber, far from the central platform where the elder races held their seats. Humanity had only been traveling among the stars for 300 years. By galactic standards, they were bobbies, newcomers, children who should be grateful they were allowed in the room at all. Had heard this message 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. The other species never said it directly, of course. They were too polite for that, but she saw it in their eyes. She heard it in the way they spoke slowly when addressing human delegates, as if talking to someone who might not understand big words. Today's meeting was about the nebula. Human exploration ships had discovered it 2 years ago. Human scientists had surveyed it. Human engineers had built the first mining platforms. Everything had been done according to galactic law. Every form filed. Every regulation followed. And now the collective wanted to take it away. High Arbiter called the session to order. He was a being made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. His species had been among the founders of the council. They considered themselves the of all races. The matter before us today concerns mineral rights in the nebula, announced. His voice echoed through the chamber like music from a glass instrument. The collective has filed a claim. Ambassador of the rose from his seat. He was tall and thin, with 4 eyes that moved independently of each other. 2 of those eyes fixed on with open contempt. The humans lack the sophistication to properly extract from the nebula, declared. Their technology is primitive. Their methods are wasteful. We propose that the Council grant extraction rights to established powers who can make proper use of these resources. Felt her hands tighten on her. She had prepared for this. She had documents, evidence, legal arguments that proved humanity's claim beyond any doubt. And what of the humans? Someone asked. Made a gesture that might have been a smile. They may retain observation privileges. We are not unreasonable. Observation privileges. They wanted to steal everything humanity had discovered and built and offer them the right to watch. Stood, if I may present humanity's position. The Council recognizes the human delegation, said, though his tone suggested he was doing her a favor. Activated her and began projecting data into the center of the chamber. Discovery timestamps, survey records, construction permits, treaties that clearly stated first discovery rights. Under Section 7 of the Frontier Development Accord, she said, any species that discovers and develops an unclaimed resource region retains primary extraction rights for a minimum of. Thank you, Ambassador, interrupted. His crystal form flickered with impatience. The Council appreciates humanity's enthusiasm. However, this matter requires consideration of factors beyond simple legal technicalities. Simple legal technicalities. The law itself was just a technicality when it protected humans instead of the elder races. One by one, the major powers voiced their support for the position. The spoke about stability and proper order. The talked about precedent and tradition. The hegemony simply stated that younger species must learn patience and accept guidance from their betters. No one asked humanity for their opinion again. The vote was quick. 31 in favor of transferring the nebula to control, 12 abstentions, 4 opposed, all from minor species who remembered what it felt like to be ignored. The motion carries, announced. The nebula is hereby designated a development zone. The human delegation will coordinate the transfer of their facilities within 60 standard days. Stood very still. Around her, the human delegation waited. Every aide and analyst and assistant watched their ambassador, wondering what she would do. She thought about 300 years of humanity reaching for the stars, 300 years of following rules that the elder races changed whenever it suited them, 300 years of being told to wait, to be patient, to accept their place at the children's table. She closed her, gathered her materials, and walked toward the center of the chamber. The conversations died away. Even the elder races fell silent as the small human woman approached the central platform where no junior species had ever stood. Humanity withdraws from these proceedings, announced. Her voice was calm and clear. Effective immediately, we suspend all participation in council functions. We will conduct a formal review of our membership and determine whether continued association with this body serves our interests. The chamber exploded into chaos. Species that hadn't spoken in centuries began shouting over each other. Crystal form blazed with agitation. Ambassador, you cannot simply leave. There are protocols, procedures. Looked up at him. We just did. Good day, High Arbiter. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, every member of the human delegation rose and followed. The doors sealed behind them with a sound that echoed through 12,000 years of galactic tradition. In the chaos that followed, most of the elder races were too busy arguing to notice the real problem. But one advisor, a quiet economist who had spent centuries studying trade networks, pulled up some data on his personal display. His crystal form went pale. Humanity supplied 17% of the galaxy's rare earth processing, 23% of its medical isotopes, 41% of the frontier's emergency response infrastructure. They had made themselves useful in 1,000 small ways that no one had bothered to track. The advisor pushed through the crowd until he reached Ambassador, who was celebrating his victory with other officials. Sir, the advisor said, his voice trembling, we may have made a serious mistake. Laughed. Mistake? We just secured the richest deposit in the sector. The humans will come crawling back within a week, begging for whatever scraps we offer them. Sir, please look at these numbers. But waved him away. The humans were young and weak and alone. What could they possibly do? 300 light-years away, on a small blue planet called Earth, emergency meetings were already beginning. Plans that had existed only as contingencies were being activated. A species that had spent 3 centuries being underestimated was about to show the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. The humans were not coming back, and the elder races were about to learn a very painful lesson about the true cost of arrogance. 3 weeks passed after the humans walked out. The galaxy waited for them to return. Every junior species that had ever challenged the council came back eventually. They always did. They would make angry speeches, refuse to attend meetings, maybe even recall their ambassadors for a few days. But in the end, they needed the council too much. They needed the trade agreements, the protection, the access to technology that only the elder races could provide. The humans would be no different. Everyone was sure of it. But the humans said nothing. Their communication channels remained open, but they did not respond to official council messages. Their ambassadors did not return to their posts. Their ships continued moving through galactic space, following all proper protocols, but human officials refused to meet with anyone from council governments. It was as if humanity had simply decided the council did not exist. The first real problem appeared on Prime, the of one of the oldest council species. Their medical facilities began running low on Compound 7, a drug used to treat radiation sickness. The compound was complicated to manufacture and required specific rare elements that were difficult to process. Humans had been producing 80% of the galaxy's Compound 7 supply for the past 50 years. They had developed new techniques that made production faster and cheaper. They had been happy to buy from them instead of maintaining their own facilities. Now those facilities were closed, and they had no other source. The health ministry sent a formal request through diplomatic channels. They explained the urgency. They offered premium prices. They appealed to humanitarian obligations. The request was returned unopened with a simple note attached. Humanity is not currently accepting communications from council-affiliated governments. On the frontier, the situation was worse. The hegemony had expanded aggressively into dangerous border regions over the past century. Their colonies there were constantly threatened by radiation storms, asteroid impacts, and equipment failures. The hegemony's own emergency response ships were stationed in the safe core systems, far from any real danger. Human emergency response teams had filled the gap. They were the only crews willing to work in those hazardous areas, flying into disasters that captains refused to approach. They had saved thousands of lives over the years. When a mining platform in the outer reaches suffered a catastrophic reactor failure, the hegemony automatically sent a distress call to the human response network. No one answered. 200 workers died in the initial explosion. Another 43 died over the following 3 days, waiting for rescue ships to travel from the core systems. Ships that arrived to find bodies floating in the void. High Arbiter called an emergency session of the council. The great chamber felt strange with the human seats empty. It was only one delegation out of 47, but somehow the room seemed much smaller. "This is an outrage," the representative declared. "People are dying because the humans are throwing a tantrum. We must force them to resume their obligations." "Force them how?" asked Prelate of the cultivar Sodality. She was an ancient being, a plant-like creature who had served on the council for over 800 years. She rarely spoke, preferring to observe and consider, but now her tendrils rustled with concern. "We cannot compel a sovereign species to trade with us." "Then we embargo them, cut them off from galactic markets." "I have been reviewing their economic data," said quietly. She activated a display showing trade routes across the galaxy. An uncomfortable number of those routes pass through human space. Truly reviewing it, not just reading the summaries our analysts prepare. I do not think an embargo would have the effect you imagine. Ambassador stood. He had been quieter than usual since the walkout, but now he spoke with his old confidence. "They are 300 years old. We are 12,000. They need our technology, our markets, our protection from threats they cannot even imagine. They will break before we do." "And how long will that take?" asked. "How many will die waiting for medicine? How many colonists will perish in emergencies that human crews would have handled? How many small disruptions will grow into large ones while we wait for the humans to break?" No one had an answer. The council voted to send a diplomatic mission to Earth. It would be a gesture of good faith, an olive branch extended to help the humans save face. They would offer minor concessions, perhaps a better seat in the chamber, more voting weight on certain issues. Small things that cost nothing but would let humanity pretend they had won something. The envoy arrived on Earth and was received politely. They were given comfortable quarters in a beautiful city. They were served excellent food and offered access to human cultural archives. Everything was pleasant and professional. Ambassador did not meet with them. Instead, they were directed to a mid-level trade representative named David Park. He was a young man with a friendly smile who listened carefully to everything they said, took detailed notes, and promised to forward their concerns to the appropriate departments for review. When the envoy tried to arrange a meeting with someone more senior, they were told that all relevant officials were currently unavailable, but would be happy to schedule something in the coming months. The envoy returned to the council with nothing, no demands they could negotiate, no concessions they could offer, no path forward that anyone could see. The silence continued. In the shadows of galactic politics, rumors began to spread. Human diplomats had been seen meeting with representatives of the Compact, a loose coalition of species that had never joined the Council. The Communion, a mysterious power from the far rim of the galaxy, had reportedly sent observers to Earth. The who had not engaged with the wider galaxy in 800 years had opened communications with human explorers. Each rumor by itself meant little. Together, they painted a picture that terrified the elder races. The humans were not sitting alone and waiting to be forgiven. They were building something, making connections, creating alternatives. High Arbiter called another emergency session. This time, the chamber was not chaotic. It was quiet in a way it had never been before. The quiet of beings who were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. "What do they want?" the delegate demanded, his voice cracked with frustration. "They must want something. Everyone wants something. Make them tell us what they want." But that was the problem. The humans were not asking for anything. They were not making demands or setting conditions. They were simply treating the Council as if it no longer mattered. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Council had been the center of everything. Every species that wanted to be taken seriously had to deal with them. There was no alternative, no other path to influence and power. Until now. Ambassador sat in his chair and stared at the data on his screen. Human trade missions to the human technology exchanges with the human exploration partnerships with species the Council had dismissed as irrelevant. 3 weeks ago, he had been certain the humans would come crawling back. Now he was not certain of anything. The humans were not trying to defeat the Council. They were not attacking or threatening or making demands. They were simply building a different future, one where the elder races and their ancient institutions were no longer necessary. And there was nothing the Council could do to stop them. 6 months after the humans walked out of the Council chamber, a discovery changed everything. An archaeological team was exploring a frozen moon in the system when their sensors detected something impossible. Deep beneath the ice, buried for longer than any civilization had existed, was a structure made of materials their instruments could not identify. It was a progenitor site. The progenitors were legends. They had been the first species to travel among the stars more than 1 million years ago. They had built wonders that modern civilization still could not understand. Every major technology in the galaxy was based on progenitor designs that had been discovered and over thousands of years. But the progenitors themselves were gone. No one knew what had happened to them. They had simply vanished, leaving behind ruins and artifacts that shaped the future of every species that came after. Every known progenitor site had been studied exhaustively. The elder races had teams dedicated to finding and analyzing anything the ancient builders had left behind. But this site was different from anything they had ever seen. This site was still active. Lights glowed within the structure. Energy readings pulsed in patterns that suggested something was waiting, dormant but not dead. The team tried every method they knew to gain access. Nothing worked. The security systems rejected their genetic signatures. The doors would not open. The interfaces would not respond to any known form of communication. After 3 months of trying, the team was ready to give up. Then someone suggested the impossible. Someone suggested calling the humans. The Council officially opposed any contact with humanity, but the scientists were desperate. They had found the discovery of a lifetime and could not even get through the front door. They sent a quiet message through unofficial channels, not expecting a response. The humans responded within a day. Dr. Sarah arrived with a team of 12 human scientists. They brought equipment they did not recognize and spoke in technical terms that were unfamiliar. The expected primitive methods and confused fumbling. Instead, the humans moved through the facility with an efficiency that was almost disturbing. They seemed to know where they were going. They seemed to understand the layout of a building that had been sealed for 1,000,000 years. When Doctor placed her hand on the central interface, the entire structure came alive. Lights blazed. Systems that had been dormant since before the first council meeting activated one after another. A holographic display appeared in the center of the main chamber, showing symbols and images that no one had ever seen before. "How did you do that?" the lead scientist demanded. "We tried every genetic key, every known activation sequence. Nothing worked." Doctor looked at her hand, then at the display. Her face held an expression that could not read. "I don't know," she said quietly. "It just recognized me." The data that poured from the progenitor archive took months to translate. Human and scientists worked together, piecing together a picture that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of its own history. The progenitors had not died. They had not been destroyed by war or disease or some cosmic catastrophe. They had evolved beyond physical form, uploading their consciousness into a network that existed outside normal space and time. They had transcended. But before they left, they had planted seeds. The progenitors had known they were leaving the galaxy behind. They wanted to ensure that someone would continue their work, would inherit their knowledge, would carry forward what they had begun. So they had encoded their genetic legacy into a new species, one that would develop naturally over millions of years until it was ready. Humanity was that species. Humans were the children of the progenitors, designed to be their heirs. When the findings were presented to the council, the chamber fell silent. Then it erupted into chaos. "This is a lie," Ambassador shouted. "A human fabrication designed to justify their arrogance." "The data has been by our own scientists," the representative replied. His voice was hollow, as if he was still trying to accept what he was saying. "The genetic markers are unmistakable. The archives responded to human DNA and nothing else." High Arbiter raised his crystalline arms for silence. "Even if this is true," he said, "it changes nothing. The humans are still young, still inexperienced. They still require guidance and oversight from species who understand the responsibilities of power." "Do they?" Prelate asked. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the chamber. "For 12,000 years, we have built our civilization on progenitor technology that we found in. We have been students studying our teachers' notes, believing ourselves wise because we could read what they left behind." She turned her ancient eyes toward the empty human seats. "And now we learn that the teachers' children have arrived. Children who do not need to study the notes because they can simply ask the teachers for help." The implications spread through the council like fire. Every technological advantage the elder races possessed was built on progenitor foundations. If humanity could access those foundations directly, if they could unlock systems that rejected everyone else, then the entire power structure of the galaxy was about to change. Ambassador stood. "This is a threat," he declared. "The humans are positioning themselves to dominate the entire galaxy. We must act before they become too powerful to stop." "Before what?" The voice came from the entrance of the chamber. Every being in the room turned to look. Ambassador stood in the doorway, but she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives of species the council had ignored for centuries. The Compact, a loose coalition of traders and explorers. The Communion, mysterious beings from the far edge of known space. The who had refused contact with the council for 800 years. And more, dozens of species that had never been offered membership in the great galactic government. Walk to the center of the chamber, not to humanity's old seat at the edge, but to the very heart of the room where only elder race ambassadors had ever stood. "Humanity is not here to threaten anyone," she said. "We are not here to demand power or territory or revenge for how we were treated. We are here to offer something else." She activated a holographic display. A new symbol appeared, one that combined elements from every species present. It was simple and elegant, designed to represent unity rather than hierarchy. The Galactic Compact announced, a new alliance based on equal representation and mutual respect. No elder races, no junior members, just species working together as partners. The council chamber exploded into shouting, but this time the chaos was different. This time it was the sound of something ancient beginning to crack. "You cannot replace the council," shouted, his crystal form blazing with agitation. Smiled, "We are not replacing you, High Arbiter. The council is welcome to join the compact, but you will have one vote, the same as everyone else. The same as the youngest species and the smallest colony. Your age will not give you authority over others." She looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. "The choice is yours. Join us as equals or remain here as relics. Either way, the galaxy is moving forward." The silence that followed was the loudest sound any of them had ever heard. The Galactic Compact offered membership to every spacefaring species in known space. There were no tests to pass, no fees to pay, no centuries of waiting for approval. Any species that wanted to join could join. One vote each, equal voice in all decisions. Within 3 months, 64 civilizations had signed the founding charter. Within 6 months, the number reached 112. Species that the Council had ignored for thousands of years suddenly had a seat at a table that mattered. The Council began to crumble. Minor species that had spent under elder race dominance saw their chance and took it. Economic agreements were renegotiated on terms that no longer favored the old powers. Trade routes shifted as merchants discovered they could do business without council oversight. The comfortable certainties of 12,000 years dissolved like snow in springtime. High Arbiter called emergency meeting after emergency meeting. He spoke of tradition and stability and the dangers of change. Ambassador demanded sanctions against any species that joined the compact. The hegemony moved warships to the borders of human space, making threats that everyone could see. None of it mattered, because humanity was not fighting the Council. They were not attacking or conquering or forcing anyone to do anything. They were simply building something better and letting species choose for themselves. That was the part the elder races could not understand. They had maintained power through strength and tradition, through the accumulated weight of ages. The idea that someone might simply walk away and build something new had never occurred to them. There had never been anywhere else to go. The breaking point came when they applied for compact membership. They were founding members of the Council. Their scientists had been studying progenitor technology since before humans discovered fire. Their departure would be more than a political loss. It would be a statement that the old ways were truly ending. High Arbiter traveled to Earth. It was the first time a sitting High Arbiter had visited a non-Council world in over 8,000 years. His arrival was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by trillions of beings who understood that something historic was happening. Ambassador received him in a simple conference room. No grand chamber, no ceremonial guards, no ancient protocols, just 2 chairs, a table, and a window looking out at the stars. His crystal form seemed dimmer than usual. The light that normally blazed within him flickered with exhaustion and confusion. "What do you want?" he asked. "Truly, Ambassador, what is the price for ending this? Name your terms, give us something we can negotiate." Considered the question for a long moment. "There is no price," she said finally. "There is no demand you can meet, no concession you can offer that will make us return to the way things were." "Then what do you want?" "We want you to be better." The words hung in the air between them. His crystal form flickered. "For 12,000 years," continued, "the Council has operated on one simple belief, that age equals wisdom, that the elder races earned their position through merit and deserve to rule because they have been around the longest." She leaned forward. But merit is not something you earn once and keep forever. It has to be demonstrated every day, in every interaction, in every choice you make. And when we came to you with a legitimate claim, with evidence and law on our side, you did not even pretend to care. Was silent, his light dimmed further. You dismissed us because we were young, said. You took what we discovered because you could. And when we objected, you treated us like children throwing a tantrum instead of equals who deserved respect. We believed we were guiding you, said quietly, teaching you how the galaxy worked. You were teaching us that the strong take from the weak, that rules only apply to those who lack the power to ignore them. That is what we learned from the Council, High Arbiter. Those were the lessons you taught us. Stood and walked to the window. Stars filled the sky, thousands of suns with worlds circling them. Worlds full of beings who were watching this moment and wondering what would come next. We could have accepted those lessons, she said. We could have become just like you, waiting for our turn to dominate the weak and take what we wanted. But we chose differently. We chose to build something based on cooperation instead of control. We chose to prove that there is another way. Rose from his chair and joined her at the window. His crystal form caught the starlight and scattered it across the room in patterns of surprising beauty. The Council will not survive this, he said. Not as it was. Too many species have already left. Too much has already changed. No, agreed, it will not. And you truly believe the compact will be better. That this new order you are building will not fall into the same patterns, the same abuses of power. Turn to face him. I believe it has a chance to be better, which is more than the Council ever offered anyone. The Council told every species to accept their place and wait their turn. The compact tells them they already have a place, right now, equal to everyone else. She paused. It might fail. Any system can fail if the beings within it choose to let it fail, but at least it is trying to be something worth building. Was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I came here to negotiate your return to the Council. I had speeches prepared, offers of compromise, threats to hold in reserve if compromise failed. His crystal form flickered again, and this time it looked almost like laughter. I find that none of them seem appropriate now. What will you do instead? I believe I will recommend that the Council dissolve itself and apply for membership in the Compact. He turned to face her fully. All of us, as equals, one vote just like everyone else. Raised an eyebrow. That will cost you everything, your position, your authority. They have led the Council for thousands of years. Your people will resist. Some will. Others will understand that the choice is between holding onto power we can no longer keep or joining a future we did not expect but cannot prevent. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Ambassador, I have lived for a very long time. In all those years I have rarely been surprised. Today, you have surprised me several times. Good surprises or bad? His crystal form brightened slightly. It was the version of a smile. I do not yet know, but I find myself curious to discover the answer. That curiosity is something I have not felt in a very long time. He left the conference room. His ship departed Earth that same day, carrying a message that would reshape the galaxy. In the council chamber, debates raged for weeks. Some elder races refused to accept what was happening. Ambassador gave speeches about human treachery and the need to maintain tradition at all costs. The hegemony continued rattling their weapons. But one by one, species began to leave. Some joined the compact openly. Others simply stopped attending council meetings. The great chamber that had once held 47 delegations grew emptier every day. And on Earth, watched the reports and wondered what kind of future they were building. She had not planned any of this. She had simply been angry, tired of being dismissed and ignored. Walking out had been an impulse, not a strategy. But sometimes the best strategies came from impulses. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to say no, when everyone expected them to say yes. The old order was dying, the new one was being born. And for the first time in galactic history, humanity was at the center of something great. 1 year after humanity walked out of the Galactic Council, the Council ceased to exist. It did not end with war. There were no great fleets clashing in the void, no planets burning, no species driven to extinction. It ended with a vote, a final act of the very institution being dissolved, a quiet death for something that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. 31 of the original 47 council species voted to dissolve and join the compact. They accepted the terms that had offered, one vote each, equal to every other species, with no special privileges for age or power or past achievements. The same rules applied to everyone. The remaining 16 species refused. They formed their own coalition, calling themselves the Traditional Alliance, and retreated to their core territories. Ambassador of the became their leader, still convinced that the old ways would return if they just waited long enough. High Arbiter cast the deciding vote for dissolution. Then he resigned his position and accepted a new role as the representative to the compact. One voice among hundreds, with no more authority than the member species. Some of his people called him a traitor, others called him wise. History would eventually decide which was true. Ambassador watched the transition from the compact's new headquarters on Nexus Station. The station had been built in orbit around the moon where the progenitor archive had been discovered. It was neutral ground, owned by no species, governed by all, a symbol of what the compact was trying to become. Prelate of the cultivar sodality had been elected as the compact's first rotating chair. The ancient plant being had surprised everyone by becoming one of the new organization's strongest supporters. She had lived long enough to see the problems with the old system, and she believed deeply that something better was possible. "You could have demanded so much more," said Tu as they stood together watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. "The progenitor technology gives humanity advantages no other species can match. You could have claimed leadership over everything." Shook her head. "We could have tried for a while, until the resentment built, until species that had been our partners became subjects waiting for the chance to rebel." She turned from the window. "We studied our own history, Prelate. Every empire built on domination eventually falls, every single one. The stronger they are, the harder they fall, and the more destruction they leave behind. And you believe the compact will be different. The compact is built on choice, on mutual benefit, on the idea that cooperation creates more value than conquest," smiled. "It might fail too. Any system created by imperfect beings can fail, but at least it is failing while trying to be something worth building." Below them, ships from 100 different species moved through the station's approach lanes. Medical vessels docked beside human freighters. Military cruisers, stripped of their weapons within compact space, served as escorts for refugee convoys. Former enemies worked together because they had discovered they could accomplish more as partners than as rivals. The Traditional Alliance still controlled about 15% of known space. Ambassador had made good on his threats. They had occupied the nebula with military force, claiming the mining rights they had fought so hard to steal. Humanity had not responded. They had not sent warships or threatened retaliation. They had simply released their complete survey data publicly, making it available to anyone who wanted it. The data showed that the nebula's deposits were far smaller than anyone had believed. The region that had fought so hard to control was barely worth the cost of extraction. He had won his prize and discovered it was worthless. Meanwhile, the compact was working together to develop new energy sources that made obsolete. The future was leaving the Traditional Alliance behind. "There is something I have wondered," said. "When you walked out of that council session, did you know this would happen? Did you plan for all of it?" Laughed. It was a genuine laugh, warm and honest. No, absolutely not. I was angry. I was tired of being treated like a child by civilizations that had stopped growing thousands of years ago. I walked out because I could not stand to sit there one more second pretending that the system was fair. She paused, looking out at the stars. I expected them to let us go, to not care. When they panicked instead, that is when we started to understand what we might be able to build. A fortunate accident. Most of history is fortunate accidents. The question is what you do with them. The Compact's first major project was already. The Nexus Archive initiative was cataloging everything the progenitor systems had revealed, translating it into forms that every species could understand, and sharing it freely with all Compact members. Knowledge that the elder races had hoarded for was now available to anyone. Humanity could have kept the progenitor connection to themselves. They could have used it to dominate, to become the new elder race, to rule the galaxy as the Council had ruled it. Some humans had argued for exactly that. Instead, they gave it away. They made the archive a shared resource that belonged to everyone. Not purely out of kindness. Access to the archive required Compact membership, required accepting the Compact's principles of equality and cooperation, required treating other species as partners rather than subordinates. It was a fair trade, and it worked. Returned to her quarters that evening. On her desk sat a small gift, a crystal prism from the being who had once been High Arbiter. A note accompanied it, written in careful human script. You asked us to be better. I am trying. We are all trying. I believe this is what hope feels like. I had forgotten. She set the prism in her window. Starlight caught it and scattered into rainbows that danced across her walls. 300 years ago, humanity had reached for the stars expecting to find wonders. Instead, they had found the galaxy's version of a government office. Ancient, slow, certain of its own importance, and completely convinced that the rules existed to protect those already in power. They had not been conquered or destroyed. They had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated, treated as children who should be grateful for whatever scraps the adults chose to give them. It was the greatest gift the elder races could have given them. Because humanity had learned something in those 3 centuries of being overlooked. They had learned patience. They had learned to build quietly, to make themselves useful, to become essential without anyone noticing. They had learned that the loudest voice in the room rarely mattered as much as the one that controlled the infrastructure. And when the moment came, when a single act of disrespect finally made the cost of staying greater than the cost of leaving, they had been ready. Not for war, for something much more powerful. For building something new. Outside the window, the galaxy turned. New trade routes carried goods between species that had never dealt with each other before. New alliances formed between civilizations that had been enemies for centuries. New species, lifted from obscurity by Compact membership, began their own journeys toward greater things. The old order was gone. The new one was just beginning. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not dominated it or controlled it or forced anyone to bow to their will. They had simply offered a better choice and let the galaxy decide for itself. Most of the galaxy had chosen them. Ambassador looked out at the stars she had never expected to see, at the future she had never expected to build, and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a very long time. Pride. Not the pride of victory or dominance or power over others. The pride of someone who had taken a stand when it mattered, who had refused to accept injustice even when everyone told her she had no choice, who had helped build something worth believing in. The humans had walked out of the council chamber 1 year ago. They had walked out angry and uncertain and afraid of what might come next. Now they stood at the heart of a new galactic order, not as rulers but as partners. Not above the other species, not below them, but among them. It was exactly where they belonged. And across the galaxy, from the youngest colony to the oldest civilization, beings looked up at the stars and wondered what might be possible now that the old barriers had fallen. The answer they were beginning to discover was everything.